My name is Claire Morris, and at 31 years old, I thought I finally understood what family meant. Growing up in California with parents who owned one of San Francisco's largest real estate empires taught me a lesson early: appearances matter more than love. The day I married Cody, my parents didn't even bother to show up. When I called to ask why, their words cut sharper than any knife could. "Enjoy marrying your handyman. We won't humiliate ourselves in front of society because of you." They had no idea what was coming. Because the photo I sent after the ceremony made their phones blow up with panic calls and desperate texts. They went from scorning me to begging for my attention. And the irony? By then it was already too late. But before I reveal what that photo showed, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe and like this video. You won't want to miss the rest of this story. From the outside, my childhood looked like something out of a glossy lifestyle magazine. We lived in a mansion in Pacific Heights with glass walls overlooking the bay. My father, Robert Morris, and my mother, Evelyn, had built Morris Realty into a company worth hundreds of millions. Our dinners were often catered, our cars polished until they gleamed, and our parties the kind that ended up in the San Francisco Chronicle Society pages. But inside those flawless walls, I never felt like enough. My younger sister Sophie, 2 years my junior, was the golden child. She had the effortless charm my parents adored, perfect posture, perfect smile, and the kind of social instinct that made networking look as natural as breathing. "Claire, why can't you carry yourself more like Sophie?" my mother would hiss during galas as I nervously adjusted my dress strap. "Look at how she engages with the guests, that's how you build connections." I tried. God, I tried. In 3rd grade, I came home with a report card full of straight A's, clutching it like a ticket to their affection. My father barely looked up from his phone. "Good job," he muttered, scrolling through emails. 3 days later, Sophie brought home a report card with B's and C's. My parents took her out for ice cream and bought her a new dress. She tried her best, they said, glowing with pride. The pattern never changed. For my 16th birthday, I received a card with $50 inside. When Sophie turned 16, she got a brand new BMW convertible in our circular driveway, topped with a giant red bow. "She needs a car to visit her friends," my mother explained, catching my look of shock. "You just go to the library anyway." She wasn't wrong, I did go to the library. I loved learning, losing myself in books rather than shallow parties. But no matter how much I achieved, it was invisible next to Sophie's charm. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would notice me. They came to the ceremony, sat in the front row, and clapped politely. But halfway through my speech, my father checked his Rolex, whispered something to my mother, and they both slipped out to attend a gala downtown. "We already heard your speech at rehearsal," my dad said later when I confronted him. Besides, the Morris Foundation was presenting a $1 million donation tonight. That's more important for the family's name. In that moment, I understood something: my accomplishments would never matter to them as much as appearances and status did. Though our family had more money than we could ever spend, my parents insisted that I take out student loans and work part-time when I went to UCLA. "It builds character," my father told me. Meanwhile, Sophie got a fully funded daddy account when she attended USC, tuition, luxury apartment, shopping trips, even a spring break in Cabo. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore, tutoring freshmen on weekends, while maintaining a 4.0 GPA in economics. I remember saving 3 months just to buy a new laptop after mine died. The same week, Sophie casually mentioned she needed one during a family call, and my father ordered her the latest Apple model that very night. When I asked why, my mother gave me the same answer she always did: "Your sister needs it more, darling. Her major is fashion marketing, she has to stay up to date." I swallowed my resentment and pushed forward. By my senior year, I had stopped trying to earn their approval. Instead, I poured all my energy into building a future that was truly mine. I graduated summa cum laude, got an offer at a mid-size financial consulting firm, and rented a small apartment in Oakland. It wasn't luxurious, but every chair, every dish, every photo frame had been paid for with my own hard work. For the first time, I felt pride, the kind that didn't require anyone else's applause. And that's exactly when Cody walked into my life. It happened on a rainy Tuesday in March. I came home from work exhausted, only to find my kitchen floor flooded. A pipe had burst while I was gone. Water pooled across the tiles, soaking into the hallway carpet. In a panic, I Googled emergency repair numbers and called the first one I saw. "Someone will be there within the hour," the dispatcher promised. 52 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I saw a tall man with broad shoulders, wearing work boots and a navy polo with Brooks Home Services stitched across the chest. His hair was damp from the rain, and his smile was warm, the kind that immediately made me feel like things would be okay. "Hi, I'm Cody. Heard you've got a bit of a disaster in here," he said with a slight laugh, lifting his toolbox. I nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah, I think the disaster's an understatement." He walked in, assessed the situation quickly, and shut off the water main with calm precision. Within minutes he had his sleeves rolled up, kneeling on the wet tiles, working with steady hands. I remember watching him and thinking how unusual it was that someone fixing pipes could carry himself with such quiet confidence. As he worked, we started talking. "So, what do you do when you're not dealing with indoor swimming pools?" he asked casually. "I'm in financial consulting," I replied, expecting the usual glazed-over look. But instead, he leaned closer, interested. "Consulting, huh? What sectors do you focus on?" We ended up in a half-hour conversation about market trends, energy investments, even sustainability, topics most people avoided like the plague. To my surprise, Cody asked thoughtful questions, referenced books he'd read, and even quoted an economist I admired. By the time the pipe was fixed and the floor mopped, I felt like I'd just met someone rare. He handed me his card and said, "Call me if you ever have another plumbing emergency. Or, if you just want to continue that conversation about economic reform." I laughed, and for the first time in weeks, the weight of my family and work pressure lifted. We met the following Saturday at a coffee shop in Berkeley. I told myself it was just coffee to thank him. But that quick coffee turned into 4 hours of conversation. We discovered we both loved history, that we'd read the same biography on Abraham Lincoln, that we both found solace in bookstores rather than crowded bars. Over the next few weeks, we went on simple but meaningful dates. We walked along Lake Merritt at sunset, cooked dinner together in my small apartment, and spent hours in second-hand bookstores, trading recommendations. Cody wasn't like anyone I'd dated before. He didn't play games, didn't try to impress with money or connections. He was simply present, genuinely curious about my thoughts and unafraid to share his own. The night I invited him over for dinner, he paused at my bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines. "You have excellent taste," he said, pulling out a copy of Joseph Schumpeter's Capitalism, Socialism and Democracy. I nearly dropped the wooden spoon in my hand. "You've read Schumpeter?" "Of course," he said with a grin. "Creative destruction is fascinating, especially applied to tech startups." That was the moment I realized I was falling for him. 3 months later, I decided it was time. Against my better judgment, I invited Cody to one of our family dinners. I still remember the shift in the air when I introduced him. "Mom, Dad, this is Cody Brooks. He owns his own home repair business." My father's smile froze, thin and polite. My mother's eyebrows rose, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "How interesting. And how did you two meet?" When I explained about the burst pipe, my mother exchanged a quick look with my father, the kind of silent judgment I'd grown up recognizing instantly. Throughout dinner, they barely spoke to Cody. Every question was directed at Sophie, who was glowing about her new boyfriend, Bradley, the son of a hotel magnate. My parents asked about his MBA, his family's properties in Europe, his connections in Napa's wine industry. Meanwhile, Cody sat beside me, answering the few polite questions they threw his way with calm confidence. He didn't flinch when my father cut him off mid-sentence, didn't let my mother's condescending tone rattle him. If anything, his composure made me love him more. In the car afterward, I apologized. "I'm so sorry. They were incredibly rude." He squeezed my hand. "Claire, you never need to apologize for other people's behavior, not even your parents." And that was Cody. Steady. Grounded. Unshaken by their disdain. The morning after that disastrous dinner, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Claire, darling," she began in her most honeyed tone, the same one she used at charity galas when trying to charm donors, "You know we only want what's best for you." "But really, a handyman? What kind of future can he provide? What will people say when they hear our daughter has married down?" Her words sliced through me like glass. I gripped the phone tighter. "Mom, Cody is smart, kind, and hardworking. He owns his own business. And most importantly, he makes me happy. Isn't that enough for you?" There was a pause, then a sigh heavy with theatrics. "You've always been stubborn, Claire. Just think about what you're doing. You could have a real future if you chose wisely." I hung up before she could say more. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was clipped, impatient. "Listen, Claire, this is just a phase. When you're ready to be serious about your future, let us know. We have several associates with sons who would be much more suitable. A lawyer, a venture capitalist, even a senator's nephew. You shouldn't waste your time on someone with limited prospects." I wanted to scream at him, but instead I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm not wasting my time. For the first time in my life, I know what I'm doing." Then I hung up. Every monthly gathering felt like walking into a performance staged for Sophie. My mother would beam as Sophie described her glamorous trips to Paris, her work in luxury branding, her connections in Hollywood. Bradley, her boyfriend, charmed everyone with stories of his family's hotel empire. And then there was Cody, sitting quietly beside me, treated like invisible furniture. My father once poured wine for everyone at the table except him, as if the bottle accidentally ran dry at Cody's glass. My mother spent 20 minutes praising Bradley's insights into European markets, then turned to Cody with a patronizing smile, "And how's the handyman business?" The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough to burn my cheeks. I apologized in the car afterward, but Cody only squeezed my hand and said, "You never have to say sorry for other people's cruelty. Their behavior reflects them, not me." His calmness only made me love him more, and hate my parents' blindness even deeper. 6 months into our relationship, Sophie and my parents invited us to the Cape House. Against my instincts, I said yes, hoping maybe, just maybe, they'd try harder. It was worse. At dinner, my father spoke about investment strategies, deliberately using dense jargon to shut Cody out. Bradley leaned back smugly, as if this was a private club Cody could never enter. My mother forgot to set a place for him at the 6-person table, offering a fake laugh when she corrected it. "Oh dear, how clumsy of me." Sophie and Bradley discussed which European cities had the best shopping, glancing at Cody when they mentioned people who never leave their neighborhoods. By the second night, I couldn't take it anymore. Walking with Cody along the beach under the star-streaked sky, I broke down, sobbing into his chest. "I don't know why they can't see you," I said. "You're smart, kind, ambitious, everything they should want from me. Why can't they see it?" He wrapped his arms around me, strong and steady. "Because they see me exactly the way they want to. That has nothing to do with who I actually am." Something in his voice made me look up. His eyes held a spark, not bitterness, but a quiet confidence. "What do you mean?" I asked. He smiled, mysterious. "When we're back in Oakland, I'll show you." The following weekend, he invited me to his apartment. It was modest compared to my parents' mansion, but it felt alive, bookshelves covering the walls, small plants on the windowsills, photographs of him volunteering at community events. While he cooked dinner, I wandered to his desk. My breath caught. Spread across it were journals filled with complex technical diagrams, water systems that looked far too advanced for standard plumbing. These aren't just repairs, I said slowly when he brought over 2 glasses of wine. They look like designs. Like prototypes. He set the glasses down, exhaling. That's because they are. Claire, I haven't told you the whole story. I didn't start out as a handyman. I studied electrical engineering at Stanford. After graduation, I worked for 6 years at a major tech firm, designing systems that, frankly, made me miserable. Defense contracts, endless hours, no purpose except bigger paychecks for people already rich. I froze. You're an engineer? Yes, he said quietly. But when my dad got sick, I stepped away and ran his home repair business. I thought it would be temporary. But I realized something, I loved the work. I loved solving immediate problems, helping real people, using my hands. But I never stopped being an engineer. He opened a drawer and handed me a folder. Inside were patent documents, technical specs, and a bold title, EcoFlow System. It's a water conservation technology, he explained, eyes lighting up. Smart valves, sensors, and a feedback loop that reduces household consumption by up to 60%, without changing user habits. I've been testing prototypes with some of my clients. Last month, I filed the patent. Right now, I'm in serious talks with 3 venture capital firms. I looked up, stunned. Cody, this is revolutionary. Why didn't you tell me? He reached across the table, took my hands gently. Because you fell in love with me as Cody the handyman. Not Cody the Stanford engineer. Not Cody the potential CEO. Just me. And that mattered more than anything. Tears welled in my eyes. For once in my life, I understood unconditional acceptance. For once, I knew I was choosing someone not for how he looked on paper, but for who he was, and who he was becoming. 2 weeks after that night in his apartment, Cody took me to the botanical garden in Berkeley, the same place we'd gone for one of our earliest dates. The air was sweet with spring blooms, the paths glowing gold in the late afternoon sun. We paused near a small fountain, and I thought he was about to make another joke about water systems. Instead, he turned to me, took my hands, and his expression shifted to something I'd never seen before, vulnerable, but steady. Claire, he said softly, meeting you changed everything for me. You saw me for who I am, not what I do. Not what I earn. You loved me as Cody, not as a resume. And I want to spend my life with someone who values character over status, kindness over appearances, and love above everything else. Then he knelt down and pulled out a small box. Inside was a sapphire ring surrounded by tiny diamonds. Simple, elegant, perfect. Will you marry me? My throat closed, tears spilling as I whispered, yes. Yes, of course I will. That night, celebrating with cheap champagne in my apartment, we laughed until our faces hurt. When I asked whether we should tell my parents about his Stanford degree or the EcoFlow project, he shook his head. No. Let's give them one more chance to accept me for who I am. If they can't, then maybe they don't deserve to know. I agreed, though part of me still hoped they would surprise me. The next day I called my parents. Mom, I said brightly, Cody proposed. I said yes. Silence. So long I thought the call had dropped. Then her voice came, cool and measured. That's quite a surprise. Have you really thought this through? No congratulations. No excitement. Just doubt. Yes, Mom. I've thought it through. I love him, and we're getting married. Well, she sighed, you need to make your own mistakes, I suppose. Oh, did Sophie tell you? Bradley proposed last week. 4-carat diamond. They're planning a June wedding at the Fairmont. I hung up with tears burning behind my eyes. Over the next few months, the difference in how our engagements were treated became painfully clear. My parents threw Sophie and Bradley an elaborate engagement party at their country club. 200 guests, champagne fountains, a string quartet. Photographers from the Chronicle snapped pictures for the society pages. Cody and I? Nothing. When I asked my mother if they were planning anything for us, she looked uncomfortable. Well, darling, we thought you might prefer something more low-key, given Cody's situation. Cody's situation. It became the phrase they used whenever they wanted to put him back in his place. At Sunday dinners, conversation revolved around Sophie's seating charts, flower arrangements, and bridal gowns. When I mentioned our own plans, a garden ceremony, a cozy restaurant reception, my mother barely nodded before turning back to Sophie, now about the bridesmaids' dresses. The most painful moment came when my father raised a glass at dinner. I've set aside $300,000 for Sophie's wedding. Only the best for my little girl. I sat frozen, remembering how he'd dismissed my wedding plans as economical. No offer to help, not even a word of encouragement. By the time June arrived, Sophie's wedding had grown into a spectacle. Her dress cost more than my car. The old cathedral was packed with 500 guests. At the reception, there were 5 courses, a 10-piece band, and fireworks over the bay. Cody stayed gracious the entire time, even when relatives cornered him with smug questions. So, do you unclog toilets every day? Was that your childhood dream? On the drive home, I broke down. I'm so sorry you had to endure that. They're horrible. He pulled me close, his voice calm. Claire, I don't care what they think. I only care that it hurts you. Our wedding will be perfect because it'll be about us, not about them. 2 weeks later, I called my parents to formally invite them. Dad, the ceremony is August 12th at Riverside Gardens. 4 p.m. He sighed. That's the same evening as the Children's Hospital Gala. We'd been on that committee for months. Maybe we can stop by the reception. Dad, the gala starts at 7. You could easily come to both. Another sigh. We'll see. I'll talk to your mother. He never did. When I called my mother a week before the wedding, she gave me a vague excuse about scheduling conflicts. Finally, the day before, I asked one last time. Mom, will you and Dad be there tomorrow? Her tone was syrupy but cold. Oh, Claire. Your father has an important meeting with investors from Dubai. We really cannot miss it. I'm sure your wedding will be lovely, though. Enjoy marrying your plumber. And then she hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, numb. They hadn't just rejected Cody, they'd rejected me. August 12th dawned bright and beautiful. Riverside Gardens glowed with fairy lights, wildflowers in mason jars, fabric draped across wooden beams. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. As my best friend helped me into my dress, I couldn't stop glancing at the empty chairs in the front row where my parents should have been. But then my Uncle Henry, my father's brother, knocked gently and said, "Your dad asked me to check on you." I told him he's making the biggest mistake of his life. So, would you do me the honor of letting me walk you down the aisle? Fresh tears spilled, but these were of gratitude. I'd love that. When the music started and I saw Cody's face as I walked toward him, nothing else mattered. His vows, our kiss, the cheers from our friends, it was perfect. During the reception, Cody's parents embraced me like their own daughter. His father, the founder of Brooks Home Services, beamed as he whispered, "He's never been happier than he is with you." That's all a parent should want. For the first time in my life, I felt what unconditional love looked like. Our wedding day was perfect in every way that mattered. We laughed, we danced, we promised each other forever under the fairy lights of Riverside Gardens. But even as I smiled for pictures, a small ache lingered. The empty chairs in the front row where my parents should have been felt like shadows haunting the joy. Later that evening, during the reception, one of Cody's former classmates from Stanford, now a venture capitalist, raised a toast. Behind him, a banner fluttered in the summer breeze. Congratulations to Cody Brooks, CEO of EcoFlow Systems. Someone snapped a photo, Cody standing with his colleagues, the banner clearly visible in the background. His posture was confident, his arm casually around my waist, his smile the happiest I had ever seen. That night, in our hotel room, I looked at the photo on my phone. On impulse, I sent it to my parents with a short message. Thought you'd like to see what you missed. Then I turned off my phone and crawled into bed beside my husband. We spent the next week in a small lakeside cabin in Vermont. Days filled with hikes through pine forests, swimming in clear water, cooking meals together, and long evenings playing board games by candlelight. No crowds, no noise, no expectations. Just us. On the third day, Cody got a call that changed everything. He stepped onto the porch to take it, and when he came back inside his eyes were shining. "It's official," he said, voice trembling with excitement. Vertex Capital just invested $5 million in EcoFlow. We're moving to full production by the end of the year. I screamed, threw my arms around him, and we laughed until we collapsed onto the couch. The same afternoon, the San Francisco Business Journal published an article. Stanford engineer secures major funding for revolutionary water conservation system. It detailed Cody's background, his patents, his mission to reduce household water use globally. Industry experts hailed EcoFlow as potentially game-changing. His face, my husband's face, was on the front page. When I finally turned my phone back on at the end of the week, it nearly vibrated out of my hand. 27 missed calls from my mother. 15 from my father. Dozens of texts. "Claire, call us immediately. Why didn't you tell us about Cody's background? We need to talk. This changes everything." I showed the phone to Cody. He raised an eyebrow. "Interesting timing, huh?" I nodded. "They couldn't bother to attend our wedding, but now they're desperate because they realized who you are." A strange calm settled over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one chasing their approval. They were chasing mine. When we returned home, the messages kept coming. Eventually, I sent my mother a single text. "Busy this week. Maybe later." Her reply was immediate: "We'd like to take you and Cody to dinner. The Harbor View at 7. It's important." Cody read over my shoulder and smirked. "Home field advantage?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "If they want to talk, they can come here." So we invited them to our apartment. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My parents stood there, polished as ever. My mother held an expensive gift bag, my father a bottle of champagne. Their smiles were too bright, too rehearsed. "Claire, darling," my mother gushed, stepping forward to hug me. I let her, then stepped back to stand beside Cody. They entered, eyes darting around our modest living room as though assessing property value. "We brought a little something," my mother said, holding out the bag. I set it aside unopened. Small talk followed: the weather, the city traffic, vague questions about our honeymoon. They avoided mentioning the wedding they had skipped. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Cody, we owe you an apology. We misjudged you. If we had known about your Stanford background, about EcoFlow, we would have." I cut him off, heat rising in my chest. "Would have what? Treated him like a human being? Shown up to my wedding?" My mother flinched. "We made a mistake. We want to make amends." I laughed bitterly. "You're not sorry for how you treated him. You're sorry you underestimated his economic potential." My father straightened his tie, slipping back into business mode. "Regardless, I think there's an opportunity here. Morris Realty is launching a sustainable housing project. EcoFlow technology would be a perfect fit. Perhaps we could discuss a partnership." Cody, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "That's interesting, Robert. But you should know EcoFlow already secured the Riverfront District redevelopment. Our investors wanted a large showcase, and it was the ideal choice." The color drained from my father's face. The Riverfront District was a project Morris Realty had been chasing for years, worth hundreds of millions. "Well," my mother said quickly, "all the more reason for our families to collaborate." I stared at them. "So that's why you're here? Not because you love me?" Not because you regret missing my wedding. But because you want something from Cody. Silence hung heavy. This isn't a business negotiation, Cody said quietly. You can't fix this with gifts or partnerships. If you want to be part of our lives, it has to be because you value Claire and us for who we are. Not for what we can do for you. They left soon after, subdued and uncertain. When the door closed, Cody pulled me into his arms. Are you okay? I nodded, surprising myself. Yes. For the first time, I think I am. I stood up to them. And I don't need their approval anymore. 6 months after our wedding, the call came in the middle of the night. It was Sophie. Her voice was trembling, thick with tears. Claire. I need your help. I sat up in bed instantly, heart racing. What's wrong? It's Bradley, she choked out. The FBI raided our apartment. He's being investigated for fraud. They say he's been running a Ponzi scheme through the hotel chain. I don't know what to do. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Bradley, the man my parents had worshipped, the perfect son-in-law with the MBA and luxury pedigree, was a criminal. Are you safe? I finally asked. There was silence, then a soft sob. They seized everything. Accounts, cars, even the apartment. I have nowhere to go. Come stay with us, I said without hesitation. She sniffled. After how I treated you and Cody? After how I laughed at you? Yes, I said firmly. Because that's what family does. Living under our roof. The next day Sophie arrived at our apartment with 2 suitcases, everything she owned after the raid. Gone was the polished, untouchable sister I had grown up competing against. She looked small, lost, stripped of her glittering armor. Cody welcomed her without hesitation. He carried her bags inside, made her tea, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. At first, Sophie barely spoke. She sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. But slowly, she began to open up. I never knew, she whispered one night. Bradley handled all our finances. I just signed whatever he put in front of me. I thought this was the life everyone wanted. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, perfect photos for Instagram. I didn't realize it was built on lies. Cody rested a hand on her shoulder. Con men are convincing because they tell us what we want to hear. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. You're actually happy, aren't you? You and Claire. Not just Instagram happy. Real happy. I smiled softly. Yes. We are. Parents in crisis. Meanwhile, my parents scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. They pressured Sophie to finalize the divorce quickly, terrified of further embarrassment. But their own empire wasn't untouched. Investigators uncovered that Morris Realty had unknowingly been tied into some of Bradley's shell companies. Their reputation, once untouchable, began to crumble. For the first time, the doors of San Francisco's elite social circles started closing on them. Invitations disappeared. Longtime business partners backed away. They even sold the Pacific Heights mansion to cover mounting legal fees and settlements. When I heard, part of me felt vindicated. The empire they valued more than love was finally costing them everything. But another part of me felt sad. Sad that it had taken public humiliation and financial loss for them to begin questioning their values. A different kind of family. Living with us, Sophie saw a new model of partnership. She watched as Cody and I planned dinners together, talked through decisions, and supported each other's careers. She saw how he asked about my day with genuine interest, how I encouraged his late nights at the EcoFlow office. One evening, she looked at us across the dinner table and whispered, almost to herself, "This is what marriage is supposed to look like." Her words broke something open inside me. For the first time in years, I felt like my sister wasn't my rival. She was just a woman, like me, searching for something real. The first crack in the armor. Nearly a year after our wedding, my parents called. Their voices sounded different, tired, smaller. "Claire," my father said, "we've been doing a lot of thinking. About values. About what matters." My mother's voice followed, thin and strained. "We've lost so many so-called friends this year. The people we thought cared about us vanished the moment things got hard. But you took in Sophie. You helped when we would have turned away. That's what family is supposed to be." It was the closest thing to humility I'd ever heard from them. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I simply told them, if you want to be in our lives, you'll have to show that you've truly changed. This isn't about business. It's about love. About respect. They fell silent, and for once, I knew the silence wasn't dismissal. It was reflection. That night, lying in bed beside Cody, I realized something profound. For years, I had defined myself by their rejection. But now, finally, I understood, their failure to love unconditionally had never been my flaw. It was theirs.